bill to the House.
The Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Speaker, I'm finding it difficult to follow why the government is adopting the line that it is adopting on this particular bill, because we are so close to having, I believe, considerable, well, not unanimity, obviously, with some parties opposing it altogether, but very close to having an overwhelming majority in this House in support of the bill, that it seems crazy that we've ended up in this situation where we're debating over a single clause and what is a substantial rewrite of patents law, which of course is well overdue. This bill was reported back from the Select Committee 2 years ago, and as others have commented, I was the chair of the Select Committee that considered this bill, and we did put a lot of time and effort into this particular matter. And I think that to find such a substantial change introduced by the Minister by way of SOP, simply notified to the other side of the House without any consultation or any engagement with us over why the government has adopted this position, I don't believe makes for very good governance of an issue that is of such major importance. And I have to say that I had a really good working relationship with the previous minister on this matter when I was the spokesperson. I consulted with him all the way through the Select Committee process, and indeed when we were dealing with this very issue, it was the subject of quite a substantial conversation. I think my colleague Claire Curran joined me on that occasion, and we really nutted through the issues, and we felt, both of us on this side of the House, that we had been well received and that we had reached a good outcome. Unfortunately, what seems to have happened is that there seem to have been some discussions behind closed doors that this side of the House has not been privy to, but which was the subject of quite a substantial blog. And I want to comment about this blog, and I'm going to table it in the House because it actually raises some serious questions. Now, I haven't got a specific date on this blog, but it looks like it was just after the bill was reported back in June 2010. And what it does is it reports on a meeting, and I understand that this blog has now been taken down from the website, so there is an element of a sense of cover-up around this, which I think people ought to be aware of, because it quotes an official that is now that is still working in the Competition, Trade and Investment part of the new MOBI, I think it's called now, formerly known as MED. But I also understand that the person who wrote this particular communication that is the subject of the blog, one Brett O'Reilly, is now also working for MOBI. And not that the two factors necessarily show a conspiracy, but it is ironic that, in fact, the very person who wrote this is now working for MOBI in this particular field. So the opening statement is, New Zealand looks like it's reversing course on software patent protection. That's the opening statement. And so that means that there is a very clear understanding that the government, straight after the Select Committee's reported back to the House, in good faith, with very explicit wording, a computer program is not a patentable invention. We have New Zealand looks like it's reversing course on software patent protection. On June the 9th, there was a meeting between representatives of New Zealand Ministry of Economic Development and representatives of the NZICT Group. Now, the NZICT Group are the big boys. They're the big players in this field. This is Microsoft and the rest of them. None of them are owned in New Zealand as far as I'm aware. It appears that New Zealand is likely to ultimately adopt an approach to software patents that is consistent with the EPO's position. My thanks to, and he mentions two people, one from a company called Schwegmann and the other from IBM, for relaying the information. Here is the summary of the meeting provided by Brett O'Reilly, CEO of NZICT. Our representative delegation met with MED in Wellington yesterday. This was to discuss the formal submission we'd made to Honourable Simon Power last week, covering our concerns about the proposed draft legislation. The end result of the meeting was extremely encouraging. While Section 15.3a will not be removed, our ideal outcome, is Section 15.3a removed by this minister? Yes, it is. So actually they've gone further than they thought they were going to get back then. Honourable Simon Power has asked MED to work with the Parliamentary Council's Office to redraft the section along the lines of the European Patent Convention. He has informed the Commerce Select Committee that Crown Law will be undertaking some redrafting before the bill gets to its second reading. Well, that conversation simply didn't happen. While it's obviously not the end of the journey, it was very pleasing to have a positive indication that the government recognises that there is a need to amend Section 15.3a. This is the one that this supplementary order paper removes altogether, to make sure it's consistent with the intent of adopting European practice. While European law does restrict software patents, this is positive progress, and the view of our team is that this would be a good outcome for the New Zealand ICT industry. Not the ones that my colleague has just tabled their submission in the House. The Kiwi software companies do not want this supplementary order paper. In summary, the MED confirmed earlier statements from Select Committee members that the intent was to follow European law, which I'm not sure where that came from. The MED acknowledged that amendment is required to achieve this. And then it talks about who attended the meeting, and then it talks about Rory McLeod, Director, Competition, Trade and Investment Branch, who began with an update on the Patents Bill Clause 15.3a. He described the decision of the Select Committee as being to move to a, quote, normal patentable situation as in Europe that did not allow patenting of software per se. Rory then went on to some detail, partly in response to questions we had raised about what the Select Committee intent was. The intent had never been to ban software patents outright, and the MED would have had serious concerns about that if it were proposed. Well, that's precisely what we did. Software should be treated like other technology, so should have a technical purpose and be an inventive step to be patentable as in Europe, which is the problem in Europe. Not just any software would be patentable, it would need to meet the above test. Embedded or not embedded is or was not the distinction that is intended. The signal that the government wants to send to us is to follow European law and practice. The MED also now clearly acknowledged that Clause 15.3a is not adequate to convey this intent. It was great being able to present practical examples of world-leading software being developed by Pingar and Aptimize, if I've pronounced those correctly, and here MED recognised the importance of these companies being able to seek patent protection. There was no mistake in what was discussed at that meeting, and I'm not surprised that this blog has been taken down off the website, and I'm glad that I'm going to have the opportunity to table it in the House, because it is, I think, really important that we know that behind the backs of the Select Committee, behind all of the proper processes that we had in place to deal with this major update of our patent law. We would call it corruption in other countries, but fortunately New Zealand is a corruption-free country, so we wouldn't call it corruption here. But there is no question that a process that had been fully agreed and properly worked through by the Select Committee has actually ended up being overturned by this meeting that we wouldn't otherwise have known about. And so it is quite clear that there has been quite a substantial amount of work done behind the scenes, truly behind the scenes, and I believe that the Parliament has a right to know that this is going on and that we are opposing the changes that the Minister is putting forward, and we invite the House to very carefully consider what has been laid before it, and to perhaps talk to the Minister, and maybe the Minister, when he has the opportunity in the later stages, in the committee stages of the bill, to actually reflect upon the amendment that my colleague Claire Curran has proposed, because it is on that condition that we will support the bill's passage through the House. Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
Mr Speaker, I seek leave to table the blog patents for software.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there any objection? There is no objection. I call Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'll take a short call on this patents bill.